There are quite a few ELA people and a lot of Spanish people. That's great. I'm going to be talking about my experiences teaching high school ELA, but I think that a lot of what I'm going to say today will really work for people who teach any grade level and any subject. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce myself real quickly. My name is Jessica Pilgreen. I'm a National Board Certified teacher, and I also have an EDD in design and creativity. My specialization is in increasing divergent thinking skills among learners. I have about 20 years of experience in 9 through 12 ELA. And if you are also an ELA teacher and you would like access to my study sets, or I might teach topics that introduce you, like I teach growth mindset, which is a topic a lot of you might introduce, whether you're ELA or another subject. But if you'd like access to any of my study sets, my username is Jess Pilgreen. So Jess, short for Jessica, followed by my unusual last name, Pilgreen. So if you search for Jess Pilgreen on Quizlet, you'll be able to pull up any of my public study sets. And I'd say about 90% of my content is public. The other 10% is quizzes and tests, like study sets I use to actually build quizzes and tests for my students, which is another wonderful way to use Quizlet with your students. All right. So before we get started, if you would like, you can log on to your Quizlet account so you can follow along. We're going to be creating we're going to be creating classes and adding study sets to those classes. So if you want to log on to your account, now is a good time to do that as people are introducing themselves in the chat feature. I'm really excited about today's session because we're going to be talking about classes. And when you have your students sign up through classes, you're going to make sure that they are getting access to some really top-notch content, and they're going to have unlimited access to things like Learn and Test, where they won't if they don't sign up through classes. So classes is just this really great feature, and we're going to talk about the benefits of using classes. But again, you want to make sure that your students are joining using classes just to ensure that they really have access to all of the things that Quizlet has to offer. Oh, Chris Cummings, any relatives in Poplar Grove, Illinois? No, I don't. Actually, the only Pilgrims that I know are the ones that are my immediate, like my husband and that. I think he has some extended family down in Louisiana, though. It's a common name in Louisiana. How can I delete sets that I have previously used but no longer want on my account? What I would do instead of deleting something, I'm always hesitant to say delete something. I would just set it to private instead. That way, if you ever decide you want it, or if somebody wants to borrow your study set and have access to it, it's not completely gone. But that's up to you. If you do happen to have any difficulty with audio, just know that these sessions are going to be recorded, so you'll have access to them later as well. Okay, so now that you're in your account, we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of using classes. So one of the biggest benefits, I would say, is that it helps me to stay organized. I am naturally a very type B, kind of go with the flow person, and I would say that Quizlet really helps me stay on top of it and keep all of my study sets and my content organized. It's also a great way to quickly and easily share your study sets by adding them to classes, rather than having to provide an endless stream of links to study sets for your students. If you just have them sign up with classes, then anytime they sign in, they'll get to see all of the study sets that are in that class, which is really fantastic. Students, you can use their data to analyze their understanding, and then as a teacher, you can plan your next steps. If you see that students aren't doing well on a study set, it might be time to go back and reteach that content. You might pull a few students aside who are struggling and remediate with them, maybe during a study hall or some unstructured class time. Or you might see that your students are really acing the study set and they are ready for a bigger challenge. So you can use a lot with the data from classes. Also, I like classes because it increases student engagement and student ownership by giving them options of different ways to learn and to review. And you can optimize the student experience by getting access to the content only available through classes for free. This is a major benefit, not just to teachers, but also to students if they're signed up through classes. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a class. If you haven't already done this, you're going to want to log into your account. Hopefully you're already at this point. And then from the top menu, you're going to select that blue button that says create. And instead of study set or folder, you'll pick class. You'll title your class here, and then you can set your permissions. Do you want students to be able to add and remove study sets? Or do you also want them to be able to invite new members? Now, typically, this is not a permission that I allow for my students in a regular class. However, I have allowed students in my Scholar Bowl group to add other students to the group and to add study sets. So if it's something where you really want students to kind of take the ownership and add material, edit material, add people, then that is something that is available to you, maybe for older students, students that you can trust a little bit more with that turning over of the ownership of the learning. But for most groups, I think you're probably going to want to leave the adding and removing of study sets and members to you, the teacher. So I usually uncheck those. Once you've set up your permissions and you've named your class, you'll simply click on Create Class, and you'll see that your class has been created for you. Now, once you've created a class, I recommend that if you create multiple classes, that you might, if you're an upper level teacher especially, you might want to name your classes by hour. That way, when you go to sort your classes, you can choose to sort them by alphabet, and they'll be populated in the order of the classes that you teach. If, however, you don't want to do hours, that's fine too. What you could do then is just sort by the name of the class, and then you could filter it alphabetically, and it would still be very easy to find your classes. All right, after you've created your classes, you're going to want to add some content, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. You'll see here on the screen, you can either add a study set, which is perfect if you already have an account and you've already created study sets. You can click on that blue button, and it makes it really easy to just add study sets that you already have in your account. But if you don't already have any study sets, don't worry. Hope is not lost. It's very easy for you to go out there and to locate some really amazing study sets that other teachers have already created. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start over from scratch. You can go out there and locate study sets that other teachers have made, and you can add those to your studies, your classes as well. So let me show you what that looks like. So here is what it looks like if you're adding a study set that you yourself have created. I clicked on that blue Add Sets button, and you'll see it's pulling up all the study sets I've made. These are all study sets I've created previously. And as I click that blue plus sign next to any of those study sets, I can even see, here we go, clicking on them, you'll notice in the background, it's shaded out, but you can see these study sets as I'm selecting them. They're populating my class in real time. So I know exactly what's being added to this class. Right? Another option, if you don't already have a study set, that's okay. Quizlet has tons of available study sets for you. So here instead, I picked the other option to browse study sets. And here in the search bar, I can browse by the study set, like the topic. Let's say I want to find something on the periodic table. I could search for periodic table. Let's say I know a class that a teacher down the hall or a co-teacher is working on building some study sets. I could search for her or his class. Or if I know the username, like my username is Jess Pilgreen, so you could type my username into that search bar, and then you would see all of my study sets. The great thing is that you don't have to use the study sets as is either. You could preview my study sets. If you want, you can copy them, and you can make alterations so that they fit your needs. Maybe you notice that you like the vocabulary that are listed, but there's way too many, like there's 30 words and you just want to give your students 15. Well, you could copy that study set, eliminate 15 of them that you don't think your students need to know, and you can still use that set and add it to your classes. So, and one thing I wanted to point out here is that students are really going to want to see the ones that you created or that other teachers have created. 41% of users that have been polled have said that they started using Quizlet because of a teacher. And the confidence is actually highest among teacher created sets. So they're going to know when you add these study sets to classes that you've approved them, you've looked at them, you know that this is high quality content and this is reliable information that they can trust and use to prepare for future assessments. So you really want to go in there and create study sets or find ones that you really like. Okay. Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at the Q&A really quick. Is there access to the PowerPoint? I know that this session is being recorded, so you'll have access to this session later. I'm not sure about the specific PowerPoint. I can find out later for you and we'll see. Do you remove students from your class after that semester? You can, if you want to keep the same classes, or if you want to add, like, if I wanted to go in and do English 1 Honors 2022, 2023, I could just tag the year onto the end if I want to keep the old classes. So that's up to you. You can either go back in and delete the students, or you can just create a new class. I have a ton of classes, so I just create a new class each year, but you could definitely do that. Yeah, and you can set your study sets to either public or private so that you don't have to go back and delete them. Yes, you can import classes from Google Classroom, and I will show you how to do that. I believe that the browse feature is available in the free subscription to locate study sets. Okay. So what you've done now is you've looked for study sets that are already out there and that are created. You know that you can customize the content, you can tweak it however you want so that the information is available on there for your students. Okay. So if you have content on there, the next step is then to add your students, which you probably cannot do currently because you don't have students unless you're teaching maybe a summer school class. But there's multiple ways that you can import your students. One is to type in students' email addresses. That's great if you have a small class and you're worried about students somehow not gaining access. So that might be an easy way to do if you already have students' emails and you have a very small group of kiddos. Now, I teach 125 students every semester, so I need something that's not going to be very time consuming. So I have a few options. I can share a link by projecting it on my whiteboard. I could print out the link and put it on a handout that I give to students, or maybe I give to parents during an open house or parent-teacher conferences. I can use a hyperlink on any classroom management system, whether it's Canvas, Google Classroom, anything like that. But if you use Google Classroom, there is an option where you just share via Google Classroom. You can import your students and you can set it up that way, which is probably the easiest if you already use Google Classroom. I would pull it up and show you guys, but I don't want to reveal my learning management system. I don't know if there's anything about violating student privacy, but I can assure you that it's very intuitive, like many other resources that you have that link easily in just a couple of clicks, where you click on, share via Google Classroom and then import your students and give permissions. It's super quick, super easy. Okay. So once you have your students, the great thing is that they log in. So this is what a student screen might look like. You'll see they're in ELA Hour 1, and they have access to all of these study sets. So this has really become sort of a student hub where they just log in and they have access to everything that they've learned for the semester. Now, this is a matter of personal preference because some people might want to go in and delete some of the old study sets just to clean it up so students don't have to scroll a lot to find the current activities. Myself, I give exams at the end of the semester. So what I like is to have sort of an ever-growing list of study sets. That way, at any time, if I need to go back and reteach something, grammar, you teach it once and it's not completely done. You need to revisit things like how to do absolute phrases, how to do appositives. I know math is another concept and science is another subject area where concepts are constantly building on each other. So it's nice to say, oh, it looks to me like you maybe need a refresher on this subject. Go to Quizlet, find the study set on this, and do a quick refresher before we get started. This also means that because it's all in one place, it's really easy to have students do these as sort of a bell ringer activity the first couple minutes of class, maybe at the end of class if your lesson runs short and you need a filler. And also you could do this as an emergency subplan if something happens and you aren't available in the classroom. So this is great to just have sort of a hub of all of these study sets in one location where students can go. All right. Also, I want to say that student choice is going to boost engagement and motivation for your students. Okay, so if they go into a study set and they have the option, do I want to learn through flashcards? Do I want to do write and spell? Do I want to take a practice test? Do I want to play match? If they go onto another website where it's the same game over and over, eventually they're going to become a little bit bored with it. But by giving them the option and saying, today I'm going to let you decide how you learn best. I'm going to let you decide how you are going to learn and master the content. You can either take a practice test or you can play a match game. By turning over some of that to them, giving them some of the power, you're going to boost both their motivation and their engagement. Another thing that I like to do is after an activity, if you want to work in some reflection or self-assessment, it's great to have students do something like this, then give them an index card and have them write down, how well did you do on today's practice test? And what are your plans for next steps to do even better? So that's another fun thing that you can do with Quizlet. Also, I love that you have the option to personalize your learning. In Learn mode, it gives you options to study quickly to build your short-term memory or memorize it all to build your long-term memory. It'll repeat terms that students miss across multiple rounds, and then they can self-assess. I don't know if you can see it here. My little bar here might be in the way, but you can determine, you can click to say if this is a term that you're still learning, or if it's a term that you already know, and then it'll help that. It'll use that information to build the next few rounds of play. Okay. You can also have students personalize their practice tests. In test mode, they can decide, do they want to do a practice test that is all written questions, matching questions, multiple choice questions, or true false questions? And how many questions do they want on this practice test? They can choose any of those formats, or they can choose more than one. If they choose, for example, matching and multiple choice, then the test gets split an even number of each question type. So you see this one here has 10 questions. If I selected just matching and multiple choice, there would be 5 matching and 5 multiple choice. And every time I click on create new test, it would generate a new test for students to take. They can also decide if they need to answer with the term or the definition. So they decide, how difficult is this practice test going to be, or am I ready for more of a challenge? So the most challenging would probably be written, and then they supply the definition. Something more easy would be true false, where they supply whether it's a true or a false answer. So you can scaffold the difficulty of these different types of questions that your students are working on. Okay. You can also have them play match game, which is a very fast-paced and fun activity. It's a drag and drop interface where they match the definition and the term. And then once those two are dragged on top of each other, they both disappear. And it's fun. There is a timer to give them a little bit of a sense of competition without being overwhelmed. They won't be embarrassed if they don't do well. You can have them play against another classmate if you would like, or you can just have them play against their previous high score. That's up to you. Okay. And also, this is a great opportunity for some self-directed learning. Because Quizlet works on Chromebooks, Macs, PCs, smartphones, they have access whether they're at school or they're at home. They can pick different modes as they become more confident with the material and they feel ready to challenge themselves. And students will build their own study sets and use Quizlet in other subjects and classes. So this is great. They have the opportunity to build their own. And I always see students years later who tell me Quizlet was one of those tools that just really helped them to be successful. It was something maybe they learned in high school, but it continued to provide them with help while they were in college or military school, things like that. This will help them. And you'll notice that as they become comfortable with it, it's one of those tools that they'll turn to in the future as well. And then as a teacher, this is one paid feature that I am going to talk about, is that with Quizlet Plus, you have the ability to check students who complete these activities. You can check their activity and you can check their mastery. So if you look at this animation here, first it shows activity. I'm hovering over each activity to see what this particular person has completed and how well they did. But then I can switch it to mastery, and I can scroll through and see which terms are the most challenging and which ones are the ones that aren't giving students as much difficulty. So I can use that to guide my instruction and decide which terms need to be retaught, or if everything looks good, it might be time to give students more of a challenge. All right. And then also, as I'm wrapping up today's presentation about classes, I want you to know that if you go to Quizlet.com/teachers, you're going to have access to a lot of helpful information specifically designed to help teachers with Quizlet accounts. And that includes the teacher guide that will be available. Okay. So we have a few minutes left for question and answer. I'm going to try to go through. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A. And I'm going to see what new questions we have here. Do the classes work well with students who have iPads for their one-to-one device? Yes. I know that it's something that works well with a touchpad. In fact, if you are playing a match game, I feel like that works best on a touchpad. It's not that you can't play it with a mouse, but if they have difficulty with the dragging and dropping, or if they have difficulty like with the touchpad, picking something up and moving, it can be a little bit challenging, but some of those other devices seem to work really well. Okay. How can you make a class private or archive past classes? So what I do typically when I'm done with the class is I go through and I just delete the individuals who were in that class. It saves my study sets in there, but there aren't students in there anymore. After browsing study sets, how do you choose to bring it into your class? Okay, so that was back on, let me find that screen. So if you already have, if you're looking for a study set that you created, you click on, let me go back here. You click on the blue Add a Study Set button, and then it pulls up all of your study sets, and then you click on the blue arrow. If you want to look for a topic that you don't have a study set on, you would click this Browse Study Sets, and then it pulls up the screen that looks kind of like, this. And then there's a search bar where you can search. So that's how you find different study sets to bring into your class. I apologize if for some people the audio is a little bit finicky. I know this session is being recorded and you'll be able to view it later on YouTube. Can students join without an email address? In my school, we are not allowed to have students share their personal information online. You know, I'm not completely sure. Our school assigns students emails that are specifically just for using for school-related issues. So that's how I have students join. Let me see if there's other questions. Oh, spell and write are under Learn now. So you still have access to spell and write. They are under Learn. So when a student, if they see this screen, instead of flashcards, test or match, you go to Learn and that has spell and write combined in there. If a teacher is debating about updating to the Plus version, what would you tell them are the benefits? So the major benefit for me of using the Plus is that student data portion. So I'm going to go back to that slide where it shows me not only who has participated, but I can also check and see how students are doing on specific terms. To me, that's probably the biggest one. And then I believe for Quizlet Live, you have the option to like customize who is in what group. So you can build, like assign the group members instead of it just being random. So that's another thing I like. And I think there are also options in terms of adding like rich text and that sort of thing to your study sets as well. And considering the price, it definitely, to me, it's worth it. It's one of the few websites that I actually am fine with paying the minimal charge each year. Oh, Beth, do you have a way of streamlining the class roster in alphabetical order? I believe it alphabetizes them automatically, the names of all your students, but I'm not sure if that's by first name or if it's by last name. Oh, okay. So Meg had a really good tip. On the iPad or iPhone, it works better if the Quizlet app is downloaded. So it might be better using it that way. If you're using something like an iPad or like a smartphone, have them download the app. Oh, okay. Many of my students have odd names. How do you work with that? I've had students list their username on a class roster. Yes. So my teaching management system, we use Teacheries, and so you can print out like a roster. And then if it's not their actual name, then I just write it in next to their name. Or you can pass it around the room and have them write it down so that you have a record of whose name goes with what, if for some reason it's not their actual name. Okay, I'm looking at some other questions. We've only got about 1 minute left. If the teacher's resource isn't posted yet, I know it's going to be posted very soon. I do use folders. Someone asked, do you use folders at all? I do, because for example, I teach growth mindset to multiple classes. So it's easier for me to add the folder to different classes rather than having to go in and add all of those different study sets. Otherwise, it'd be like growth mindset 1, growth mindset 2, growth versus fixed mindset statements. Like I'd have to go in and add each of those to each class. So it's easier for me to add those study sets as a folder. So that's something that you can do as well. Yes. Are all of these features part of the free version? I think the only thing that I mentioned that is not part of the free version is that student data piece at the end. But you do want to make sure you are adding students in your classes so that they have unlimited use of the learn features and the spell and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, it looks like our time is up, so I just wanted to thank everybody for attending the session. I have my contact information here if you do need to contact me. The easiest way is probably through my email address here on the screen. And again, if you happen to teach ELA or growth mindset or any of these other topics that you think might be interesting, please feel free to search me on Quizlet using my username, Jess Pilgreen. Thanks again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.